I have the great pleasure to welcome Ollie Ollerton, SAS Who Dares Wins instructor, author, influential and inspiring speaker to that podcast, Death, a Changing Industry. Ollie, thank you so much for joining me today. You're joining us at the NEFD conference on the 20th of May, which I, along with all the NEFD members, are really excited to see you there. So today we'll get a taste of that. You and I have discussed many times about how we empower future generations by giving them tools, and how bereavement awareness being taught in the schools can build resilience.
Yeah, firstly, I'd like to say, John, it's amazing to be on the podcast with you today, and I'm really looking forward to the conference on the 20th. It is the 20th, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
On the 20th of May. And it's been amazing getting to know you over this time. So, we've had a couple of meetings, a couple of virtual, and I came down to see you for a face-to-face. And it's an absolute pleasure to connect with you, not only for the conference, but on a personal basis as well. So those that don't know me, and listen, I don't take my kudos from the TV show SAS Who Dares Wins. However, in 2015, I was extremely humbled to be a part of what was called SAS Who Dares Wins. And that was when I went from the shadows into the spotlight for a show that really wasn't about the military. It was really about human psychology. It really tapped into the power of who we are as individuals, which is a lot of the topics I talk about. So that show, although I thought it was going to be a one-off, it went on and on and on. It's still going on. I'm no longer part of the UK version of SAS Who Dares Wins. I'm not actually in Australia, but I filmed for Channel 7 over in Australia for SAS Australia, which is another great show. Can I say it's better?
It can.
Yeah. No, I enjoy it a lot more, so it's better for me regardless, but I do get told it is far better, so it's not just come from the horse's mouth. Aside from that, the TV stuff is a sideshow. This was, for me, my step into the spotlight was really to give my company exposure. My business breakpoint is what I'm really passionate about, and that comes from a personal journey. It's not from textbooks, it's from a personal journey. It sounds quite 007, to come from the Special Forces, be on TV, and sounds like a very glamorous lifestyle, but it has been a bumpy road. Not so much these days, but it has been a very bumpy road where I did have to ask myself a lot of questions and really rediscover, discover who I was properly for the first time.
This ties into, again, education, children around death and bereavement. In your book, Battle Ready, you talk about the importance of becoming resilient and mentally tough. How can someone who is grieving use these principles to move from a place of despair to one of growth and empowerment?
Yeah, great question. First of all, I'd like to say, death and the circumstances that surround it is a very, very broad spectrum. So it's hard for me to sort of say this is exactly what you should do and this will work for you, because it's not. It's a case-by-case basis relative to the person. When it comes to grieving, you should never not grieve. That is a process, something you've got to go through. And two things can happen there. First of all, you can hold that in and deny it. At the end of the day, this is a traumatic event, a highly traumatic event. So it's basically trauma, and you can't turn your back on that. So I do feel there has to be a grieving period. I mean, that's extremely important. I can really understand that grieving process may be absolutely horrendous when it's all of a sudden, didn't expect it to happen, and then all of a sudden, that unfortunate event occurs. There's different types of grieving. If you expected it, then you know what's coming. You understand that, but it is a broad spectrum. The only thing I'm sort of saying in those circumstances is really do allow yourself that period for grieving. And just understand that whoever you've lost, look at it from their perspective, because if you're continuing that grieving for an extended period of time, and it really is starting to affect your life on a negative basis, then that is really not something that someone that you've lost would like to see. You need to move on. Hold the memory of them close. It will get easier over time, that's for sure. Time's going to come and go when, it gets bad birthdays and things like that. But really, you've got to hold their memory close and really embrace the memory of their life on this planet. It's never going to be easy.
That's a key thing that I've really honed into the last 12 months. Is when someone dies, it's not the end. Physically, it's the end, but that emotional love carries on. And I think in the UK now, Ollie, we're seeing a big rise in unattended direct cremation, which is basically like no funeral service. And it really worries me about not having that physical contact to say goodbye. Any thoughts on that?
Do you mean around the recent times of...
Yeah, I mean, the last couple of years, it's really grown in the UK. There's quite aggressive...
What's the reason for that? I mean, what's...
So I think cost was one of the main points of it, because it says no funeral service, there's no hearse, so it's cost effective from one point, but the marketing around it is almost like taking the grief out of a funeral, and it's quite alarming because like you need to have tears, you need to have sadness to move forward.
Yeah, and also I think that's terrible, to be quite honest. I know it's obviously something that occurs, especially when people haven't got anyone to send them off, if you want to call it that. But no, I think that's terrible. That's certainly something that should not be sold as a positive.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's not just about grieving their life, it's about celebrating their life. My uncle just died last week, and that is a time for all the family to get together. There's a lot of family there that you haven't seen each other for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And it's really good to get together as a family. So I don't agree with that whatsoever.
It's interesting. It's as long as the public are aware of what it is and the implications, I'm comfortable with it. But obviously education again is the key with this. So yeah, another question for you, Ollie. In your book, Breakpoints, you talk about overcoming personal struggles and challenges, as you've mentioned at the start of this. What advice would you give someone who is struggling with a loss, whether it be a family member, a friend, or a change in their life, such as a career change?
You've got to start to understand. I think really a lot of what we're talking about here today, John, is also the fact about people starting to develop the skills to really empower themselves to understand the potential of who we are. So let's just for a second take it away from just bereavement. I have a very focused and religious process, a discipline process that I go through, not every day, life gets in the way, work gets in the way, but the majority of days I go through a process where I am the most important project there is, and I always will be. And I established that in 2014 when I came back before the show, SAS 2 Days When it started. I knew I needed to make some changes, some big changes. Now, one thing I'll say on that for me, and this can happen a lot when people lose someone or anything majorly traumatic happens in their life, a lot of people turn to drink, drugs, to give yourself that numbness.
Yeah.
Where you really haven't got to think. That is the worst thing you can do. I'm not saying don't go out, have a drink, even get, absolutely blind drunk one night, but don't allow that to continue, because that is nowhere a solution. I used to drink heavily, and that was one of my biggest problems. And at the end of the day, I didn't have a drinking problem. I had a problem that caused me to drink. And that was the fact that I'd gone through some quite horrendous trauma that started at 10. And, I'm not blaming the military for that. So for me, it was about myself removing all those things, all those things that were like a smoke screen for me to get the raw nerve of what was causing me the problems. I made those negatives my goals. So all those things that were holding me back, like the drinking and the very destructive behaviors, I made those my goal. And it was really important that I really focused on that so I could get to me. I haven't stopped the routine because I focused on 3 things for me, and that was mind, body, and nutrition. And it's really important that I focus on those 3 things. So now I haven't stopped doing that. I was broken, I was battered, I was scarred, not more mentally than physically. And I knew I needed to change the person I was because I was dragging around the past with me. That's the way that we're wired as humans. Without any clear, defined goals of where we want to be and who we want to be, we become a snapshot of the past. And we're forever dragging up the past. That's just our normal human survival instinct. It's really important that we try and get away from that. Predominantly, those thoughts of the past will be negative. They're the things that we hold on to, and that's the survival instinct within us, because we're forever remembering things that could cause us harm, mentally and physically. We're wired to basically focus on them to avoid them in the future. We're no longer being chased by a T-Rex. We're no longer being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, but that sort of primal instinct within us is still there.
Well, so I think that's what we see now, isn't it? We see a lot of adults who are struggling, and a lot of it's to do with childhood trauma that hasn't been dealt with. When you were 10, you had that trauma. We spoke before about that chimp attack that you had.
That was a chimp attack, yeah, where I was at the circus and I got attacked by a chimp, a fully grown 50-kilogram chimp. I was with its young. I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, and the chimp at the end of the day was protecting its young. It saw me as a threat and attacked me, and it was hell-bent on killing me. The thing is, when we go through a traumatic event, we have this innate ability to be able to lock away that intimate trauma. And that is there to help us get through the short term of that experience. But the thing is, you then shouldn't think that you can push it away and it's not going to come back and haunt you unless you deal with it. It will come back and haunt you. And for me, as a 10-year-old boy, I slid that away so far, and I didn't even know where. I didn't even know where that box was. I threw away the key and thought that I could just crack on with life. And really that trauma haunted me. I don't mean I was waking up in nightmares of chimps every night. That haunted my behaviors and a lot of the decisions I made and a lot of the things I did through life. Up until that point, I realized looking back that I learned compassion. I learned a lot of compassion for the chimp. The chimp didn't come looking for me. I went into somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. This is what we do as humans, and this is what I'd done. I was the victim, and give a lot of people a chance to be a victim, and they will flipping take you to the bank on that one. And it's really hard that we have that self-reflection, that we don't allow ourselves to become the victim. For the first time, I looked at that situation, had compassion for the chimp. I took myself out of being a victim and made myself a bigger part of that situation as opposed to the focal point of it. It wasn't until 2019 that I actually dealt with that. Thing is as well, a lot of human nature, we try and push it away. And the other thing that people try and do, they try and be the person they were before the trauma. You're not that person anymore. The more you hang on to the person that you were, the more frustrated and the more confused you're going to be. You're chasing something that isn't there.
You see that with funerals as well, with death. People almost mourn the life they had. But we also see it as well with young people that lose, like, for example, a baby. They mourn the life they could have had, which can be even worse. So it's about, again, I think it's just with awareness. Obviously, you can't not make it sad, but with awareness and tools, I think you can make the experience better and give them more resilience, as you've always discussed and talked about. Just going back slightly as well, you mentioned about victims. I see sort of society now where we have more victims now. Would you agree with that? And if so, why are we seeing this?
I mean, I totally agree with you there that there is. And I think really, society is making people a lot less resilient than they naturally used to be. Humanity was born from struggle. There's a lot of different areas and different sort of facets of this problem. But really, at the end of the day, I think people don't understand that, life is tough. Especially for young people, you've got to understand that people will cheat on you. People are going to die. There's going to be some quite horrendous things that are going to happen in your life. And we've got to really make sure that we start to build that resilience so that we don't fall apart when these things happen to us. Just learning to understand that, it helps you accept it. You've only got to look these days. I mean, we're being sold this lifestyle that we should be chasing this absolutely problem-free life where there's no speed bumps, there's no nothing. It's just smooth, straight, linear road. Death is not a failure, but it comes under the same bracket as this, that we've got to learn to embrace failure. Because this is where we learn, this is where we grow. And when we haven't got failures in our life, we've got nothing in our life. We're not growing and we're not learning anything. One thing I know is, probably may sound a bit cold for me to say this, but at the end of it, no one's getting out alive.
No. And that's why, again, teaching about it's the only thing that's going to affect us all. And back to sort of what you were saying just then about life and challenges. I think people who want to have a quiet life, to have a quiet life, it takes lots of work, which is undervalued. It's not put out there enough, really. If you want a quiet life, you've got to work for it.
Yeah. And also the fact, John, it's like, this quiet life that they're being sold. I mean, I find, and I've been both ends of the scale here, the freedom is in the discipline. The freedom is in you having some kind of structure in your life where you are challenging yourself. This vision of sitting on a beach at the end of your working life where you're just doing absolutely nothing but drinking cocktails, that is living hell. It might sound good for a couple of weeks, but you're going to get pretty bored of that. When you have mental health issues and problems, it's because your mind is just absolutely tired of your boring routine. And this is what I say as well about people that are grieving. When it comes to grieving, it's very easy to become extremely insular. Yeah. It's the same with any mental health issue, and lock the door and lock off the outside world. It's like water. We're 75% water, and the longer we sit still, we start to stagnate, just like water. So really, if anyone is struggling, to get yourself out, it might be something that you don't do, and you should be doing it as part of your daily routine anyway. But to get yourself out, get yourself off for a walk into nature. It is so powerful, so powerful. But what happens, we become insular, become locked in this routine. We don't want to see people, we don't want to engage with people, we don't want to even engage on social media, and that is really a spiral of, it's not going anywhere good when it goes like that.
I interviewed Julia Samuels a few months ago, who's a psychotherapist and author and a presenter as well, and she's a grief expert, fascinating lady. You got on really well with her. She talks about exercise. How basically that's one of the key factors in moving forwards, is getting outside fresh air in your lungs and move your body. We've forgotten this basic stuff in society.
No, 100%. And at the end of the day, I did some quite extreme stuff, but the most important project is you. And a lot of people look at that and go, well, that sounds a bit selfish. But there's a reason you get on an aeroplane and they say that in an emergency, make sure you put on your own mask before you help anyone else. That is the analogy. At the end of the day, we've got to make sure that our root system is extremely deep-seated and well-founded, so that when the storm does come along, we don't just fall over, in the first gust of wind. We're strong. And when we create that through self-love, self-development, and really investing in ourselves, we are a better asset to everybody. You've got to try and learn to be the emotional observer, because if you can't control your emotions and you're not aware of them, and this can be in the fear, anxiety, ego, all kinds of stuff. If you can't control them, or you haven't got any kind of understanding or awareness of them, they're contagious. Once they start, they only know one direction, and that's forward. For me, as a former Special Forces soldier, I do push myself and do some quite extreme stuff. I hear people out there going, on Instagram and stuff like, I've got no fear, this guy's got no fear. The people that have got no fear are either dead or they're going to be dead soon. There's no such thing, but it's not turning your back on fear. It's about understanding that emotion. Fear is the one thing that will grab you or focus your attention above any other emotion. And that is because it's a threat to life. It's a mental and emotional rehearsal for something you don't want to happen. Now, a lot of the time, we go into this stress, anxiety, when you've lost someone, and it could be that person that's the breadwinner, and et cetera, and there's all kinds of worries and anxiety. You're troubled by the past, you're trying to piece together the future, and that's what causes anxiety. We barely, as humans, and this is something I consciously am trying to do all the time, is living in the moment. Your survival instinct is the strongest instinct that we've got. Subconscious behavior. And when you're in that survival instinct, that survival mode, you will pick future outcomes that are the worst case scenario, because anything that's better than that is an absolute win. Your mind has a lot more ability to embrace negative situations than it does positive situations, especially when you're stressed. For me, and how I've overcome my problems, is really starting to understand how we're wired. We're not just big lumps of meat and gravy that work, eat, sleep, and repeat. Do you realize you are 1 in a million when it came to the moment of conception? Your gift is life. You actually get here onto this planet, and millions don't make it, and that's a gift in itself. And then really it's, life is saying to you, so what you got to give me? It's about really starting to understand that, get the most out of life, make the most out of every moment.
And also it's like practicing gratitude, isn't it? Understanding how lucky, like you just say, we're so fortunate.
Tell you what, John, that's such a great point. When it comes to that grieving period, I think it can be made worse, if there was unfinished business, with that person, the last words that you spoke to that person were not great, and there's a lot of guilt there. And I can imagine that makes that grieving process quite hideous.
I arrange funerals daily with people. It's amazing how, even though the shock will come in and disbelief and anger and guilt, some people I've sat down with never considered that their parents might die one day. And I feel very fortunate that I have accepted it and I understand it totally. I'm ready to roll, and I want to sign out of here. I want to go out, with a smile on my face, high five my sons and my daughter-to-be, and that's gratitude. Some people say to me, not many people, but a couple of challengers who said, they don't want their children to learn about grief and death because I want them to be kids. We're not going to teach them about like coffin choices or curse types. It's just about emotions and feelings.
Yeah.
And they're already seeing it on their TVs, on their stories and books and films. So what would you say to those people then, who are concerned by it?
Yeah, first of all, let me go back because I remember the things, and it comes to gratitude. And really, when you're grieving someone, it's about, think of 3 things, 3 amazing moments of their life that you can remember and hold on to. Allow that to become the memory. Hold on to that memory and hold that close. And when it comes to that memory, and it's a special memory, put yourself back there and add emotion to it. What did it feel like? It's really important that people do that. Going back to your question there, John, this is the problem. See, people are wrapping their kids up in cotton wool. Absolutely. Doing everything for them. They don't want them to be hurt. They don't want them to fall over, and they're not preparing them for life. And that's mentally and physically. If you do everything for your kid and you're always there, to catch them when they fall, you're not going to be there forever. You know, you're not going to be, you're not helping them whatsoever. It's just important that we allow them to become independent. You know, I've got my stepson who's 14, and it's really interesting because he's gone through that stage where they come up with a problem, and for their life up until 14, their solution has been to ask mum or dad or whatever, you know. There's no problem solving going on or anything like that. And now when William comes up, it's like, I can't find, like this morning, I can't find the things for the dishcloths. If he looks under the sink. And I just said to him, William, in future, don't come and ask us. First of all, you've got to try and solve the problem yourself. It's like a lion cub, you know, it's like being mothered for all its life. As soon as it goes out to the wild, it's going to be eaten.
Too much protection is always, it's like damage, it's damage, isn't it?
I see it as abuse. I know it sounds extreme, but I see it as abuse because you're not helping them shift into later life. You're not going to be there forever.
And when a trauma does happen without overprotection, and even like through COVID, everyone just went to meltdown. There's no resilience there, is there, to actually deal with this, with these problems that occur, and they're going to occur.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, you know, and I talk about this a lot. I'll mention this when we're at the conference, but failure is an absolute weapon. This is where we build resilience. You've got society these days that are creating this model of perfection. Social media is terrible for it. You know, everyone on social media is faking perfection. Kids don't want the journey. They want the end product, the thing that looks amazing. I don't want to do that. They've got to understand that success is a series of failures. And 9 times out of 10, this is where we grow. And it's just about embracing those failures. You know, 3 things. What did I learn? What did I do well? What didn't I do well? How am I going to do it differently if I do it again? That's how you build resilience as far as I'm concerned. You know, embrace failure and just understand that's a part of everyday life. I expect to fail. No, it's not fail for me. I learned something from that. It's only a failure in its most common terms if you just shy away in the corner and don't ever take that step into discomfort ever again. Use fear in its positive state.
Thanks, Ollie. It's fantastic. Well, hopefully this will give members who are coming to the conference and the public who are apparently coming now to see you as well a taste of what's going to come. And just for me personally, just a huge thank you for all the support you've given the petition as well. That's now over 11,000. That's finished now. And I'm due back at Parliament at the end of the year to talk further. And hopefully we'll achieve our goal. And just a big thank you to you. You've been instrumental in getting the message out there and making people understand, you know, death is part of life.
No, thank you, mate. I really appreciate that. And listen, I'm so looking forward to that, the 20th. It will be a powerful session that everyone will love. I can guarantee it. And also, mate, I really want to, you know, commend you for what you've done. You know, you don't need to do this. What you've done is making a massive difference. So well done to you, mate. I think it's really commendable.
Thanks, Ollie. Thanks so much indeed. And we'll see you in a few weeks, mate.
Can't wait.